I once asked a woman I worked with every day if she was okay. She looked at me and said she wasn't, because I had given her hope without ever making a promise. At that moment, I realized how silence, not words, can change someone's life. This is the story of a love that never began, but still knew exactly how to end. My name is David. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a department manager at Microsoft. I live in Redmond, not far from the campus, in a small apartment that feels quiet most evenings. I've been with the company for 7 years, and for the last 2, I've been leading my own team. I like structure, clear goals, and calm routines. I've always believed that if you keep work professional, life becomes simpler. Emma has been my assistant for a little over a year. Most days start the same. I arrive early, usually before 8. The building is still half asleep, lights dim, coffee machines humming softly. Emma is often already there. She always says good morning first, like it actually matters to her. She knows my schedule better than I do. Meetings, calls, deadlines, travel plans. Everything is printed, highlighted, ready. At first, I noticed her only as a very good employee. She was organized, sharp, and never complained. If something went wrong, she fixed it quietly. If I forgot something, she reminded me without making me feel careless. That kind of reliability builds trust fast. Over time, the days began to blend together. Long meetings that ran late. Quick lunches eaten at desks. Shared glances when someone said something awkward in a meeting. Small smiles that didn't mean anything on their own, but somehow stayed with me longer than they should have. People at the office started making comments. Nothing direct, just jokes. Someone once said, "If Emma ever leaves, this whole department will collapse." Another time, during a late meeting, a colleague laughed and said, "You two work like a married couple." I smiled, Emma smiled, and we both moved on. I never corrected them. I also never encouraged it. Emma paid attention in ways that went beyond her job description. She remembered how I took my coffee. She noticed when I was tired. If I skipped lunch, she'd leave a sandwich on my desk and pretend it was just extra. When deadlines piled up, she stayed late without being asked. I told myself this was professionalism. Dedication. Nothing more. But there were moments that felt different. Sometimes, after everyone left, we'd still be there, the office quiet, lights dimmed. We'd talk about work at first, then about small things. Movies she'd watched. A place she wanted to visit someday. I didn't share much about myself. I never talked about my personal life. I thought keeping that line clear was the right thing to do. Emma listened carefully when I spoke, even when what I said wasn't important. She looked at me when she talked, not at her phone, not at the screen. There was warmth there. I noticed it. I just didn't know what to do with it. From my side, things felt controlled. I had my life outside the office. I believed that as long as I didn't cross any boundaries, no one would get hurt. I never touched her, never flirted, never said anything that could be taken the wrong way. I assumed silence was safety, but silence can be loud. There were days when I caught her watching me during meetings, her expression serious, almost searching. If our eyes met, she'd look away quickly and return to her notes. I told myself I was imagining it, that this was just the intensity of working closely together. One evening, we walked out of the building at the same time. The parking lot was nearly empty. She stopped beside her car and asked how my day was, not in the usual polite way, but like she actually wanted to know. I answered briefly, as I always did. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, then smiled and wished me a good night. Driving home, I felt an uncomfortable weight I couldn't explain. At work, Emma never crossed a line. She was always respectful, always professional, but the attention was constant. Subtle, steady, and slowly, without saying anything, she built hope around moments that, to me, felt harmless. I didn't know she was reading meaning into my calm, into my trust, into the way I relied on her. To me, she was an important part of my work life. To her, I was becoming something else. I see that now. Back then, I thought doing nothing was the safest choice. I believed that as long as I didn't make promises, I wasn't responsible for expectations. I didn't realize that sometimes, presence alone can feel like a promise. And so the days continued. Meetings, emails, late evenings, quiet conversations. Two people sharing space every day, each carrying a different understanding of what that closeness meant. That was how it started. Not with words, not with intentions, just with routine, attention, and a silence that slowly filled with hope on one side and and caution on the other. The months that followed settled into a rhythm that felt natural on the surface and complicated underneath. Nothing changed officially, yet everything slowly shifted. Emma became even more present in my day. Not louder, not more demanding, just steady, constant, always there. Our department was growing. More projects, more pressure. I trusted Emma with almost everything. She screened calls, filtered problems, protected my time. If a meeting went badly, she noticed before I said a word. If I was distracted, she adjusted the schedule without asking. She learned my moods the way people do when they care, even if they never admit it. Colleagues noticed how smoothly things ran. They often came to her before coming to me. Sometimes I'd hear, "Emma already handled it," and feel relieved. She made my job easier. That mattered more than I realized. The jokes continued. Casual remarks in hallways. Smiles exchanged when we walked into meetings together. I never encouraged it, but I also never stopped it. Correcting people felt unnecessary. I told myself it was harmless office humor. Emma, on the other hand, was building something quietly inside herself. She began staying later than before, even on days when there was no reason to. When I told her she could leave, she'd say she just wanted to finish a few things. I didn't push. I appreciated the help. I didn't ask why she never seemed in a hurry to go home. Sometimes we'd sit across from each other in the conference room long after dark, laptops open, not really working. We talked about projects, then drifted into small personal details. She told me about growing up far from the city, about moving for this job, about how hard it was to start over at 27, knowing no one. I listened. I nodded. I asked questions. It felt polite, human. I still didn't talk about my own life. There were moments when I sensed expectation in her pauses, like she was waiting for me to say something else, something personal, something that would open a door. I never did, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I believed clarity meant restraint. What I didn't see was how restraint can be interpreted as patience. Emma started organizing her day around mine. If I mentioned a deadline, she stayed. If I looked tired, she brought coffee without being asked. When I thanked her, she smiled in a way that felt hopeful, almost relieved, as if gratitude itself meant progress. Once, during a team lunch, someone asked me if I was seeing anyone. It was said casually, without intent. I answered vaguely, said my focus was on work. Emma didn't say anything, but I noticed how still she became. Her hand stopped moving. Her attention sharpened. I didn't correct my answer. I didn't tell the truth either. At the time, it felt private, necessary. My personal life was my own. To her, it sounded like possibility. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Nothing happened, yet something was happening all the time. A slow accumulation of meaning on one side, and quiet avoidance on the other. One evening, as we walked out together again, she asked if I ever thought about leaving, about changing cities, starting fresh somewhere else. I said no, that I liked stability. She nodded, but her expression shifted, like she'd hoped for a different answer. I didn't ask why she wanted to know. I assumed that if she needed something from me, she would say it. I believed adults speak when it matters. I didn't understand how hard it can be to speak when you're afraid the answer will end everything. Emma was waiting for a sign. Something small. A word. A gesture. Anything that would confirm what she already believed. I was waiting for nothing at all, convinced that silence was neutral. It wasn't. I began to notice the emotional weight in her presence. The way she watched me enter a room. The way disappointment flickered across her face when I focused on someone else. It made me uncomfortable, but not enough to address it. I told myself I was overthinking. At the same time, my life outside the office was moving forward. Quietly. Intentionally. I kept that part separate, convinced that professionalism required distance. I never considered how unfair partial distance could be. Emma mistook consistency for intention. She mistook closeness for direction. And every day I allowed that misunderstanding to continue. Her hope grew stronger, more rooted, harder to undo. I see now that nothing is more dangerous than a story that exists only in someone's head, fed by everyday moments that feel ordinary to one person and essential to another. By the time she decided she could no longer stay silent, the gap between us was already too wide. She had crossed an emotional distance I never realized we were measuring, and all of it happened without a single promise ever being made. The day it happened looked like any other. Meetings stacked back to back, emails piling up, people moving through the office with the usual urgency. Nothing in the morning hinted that something was about to break. Emma was quieter than usual. Still efficient, still precise, but more contained. She avoided unnecessary conversation, focused on her screen, kept her answers short. I noticed it, but I assumed she was tired or stressed. I didn't ask. By early evening, most of the floor had emptied out. The office lights dimmed automatically, leaving only a soft glow over the desks. I was finishing notes from a call when Emma stood in my doorway. She asked if I had a minute. Her voice was steady, but there was something final in it. Not dramatic, just resolved. We went into a small conference room. She closed the door behind us. That alone felt unusual. We rarely closed doors. She didn't sit right away. She stood with her hands resting on the back of the chair, as if grounding herself. I asked what was wrong. She took a breath, slow and deliberate, like someone preparing to step into cold water. She said she needed to be honest, even if it made things uncomfortable. I didn't interrupt. She told me she had tried to ignore what she felt for a long time, that she knew it wasn't appropriate, that she never wanted to cross a line or put me in a difficult position. She said she had convinced herself it would pass. It didn't. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. She talked about the late evenings, the conversations, the way I relied on her. She said she knew I never promised anything, but that hope doesn't always need promises to grow. She said she cared about me, not in a dramatic way, not impulsively, slowly, carefully, over time. She told me she wasn't asking for anything, not an answer, not a future. She just needed me to know. She needed the truth to be out in the open, because carrying it alone had become too heavy. The room felt smaller with every word. I listened without moving, without reacting. Inside, everything tightened. Not because I returned her feelings, but because I realized how far things had gone without me noticing. Or maybe without me wanting to notice. When she finished, there was a long silence. I told her I was sorry she had been carrying that alone. I said I never intended to hurt her, that I valued her deeply as a colleague and as a person. She nodded, but didn't look relieved. I said there was something she needed to know, something I should have been clearer about from the beginning. She looked up then, fully attentive, like that moment mattered more than anything else she had said. I told her that I was in a relationship, that it wasn't new, that it was serious. Her face changed instantly. Not dramatically, just a quiet collapse. Like something inside her finally gave way. She asked why I never said anything. I told her I kept my personal life separate from work, that I believed it was the professional thing to do, that I never thought silence would cause damage. She said silence isn't empty. It fills itself. She asked if I ever felt something for her, even briefly, even by mistake. I answered honestly. I said I cared about her, respected her, trusted her, but I never allowed myself to imagine more. I never gave myself permission to go there. She looked down, processing that. Not angry, just tired. She said she wished she had known earlier, that knowing the truth would have hurt, but not like this. That hope can survive uncertainty far longer than it should. I apologized again, not as a manager, not as someone protecting boundaries, as a person who finally understood the impact of his inaction. She said she didn't regret telling me, that saying it out loud was still better than pretending it didn't exist. When we left the conference room, everything felt exposed, like the air itself had changed. We walked back to our desks in silence. She gathered her things quickly, efficiently, as she always did. Before leaving, she stopped and looked at me. She asked if everything would go back to normal. I didn't know how to answer. I said we would keep things professional, that I would give her space, that I wanted her to feel safe at work. She nodded, but there was no comfort in it. After she left, I sat alone longer than usual. The office felt unfamiliar, as if a quiet agreement had been broken. I replayed the conversation in my head, every sentence, every pause. I realized then that honesty, when delayed too long, can feel like betrayal even when no rules were broken. Emma had taken a risk. I had avoided one. And in that imbalance, something fragile had been lost. By the time I left the building, I knew this was not the end of the story. Just the moment when everything unspoken finally surfaced, leaving both of us to deal with what remained. The morning after our conversation arrived quietly. No tension in the air, no dramatic shift in routine. The office looked the same. The hallways, the screens, the familiar hum of work beginning. Only I felt different. I arrived a little later than usual. I had barely slept. Everything Emma said replayed in my mind, not as accusations, but as facts I had failed to see. I told myself that clarity was coming, that things would finally be defined, even if it was painful. When I walked into the office, I was wearing my wedding ring. I hadn't planned an announcement. I didn't believe work needed explanations. My marriage had happened privately, intentionally quiet. No photos posted. No congratulations expected. I believed that keeping it separate was still the right decision. Emma was already at her desk. She noticed immediately. I saw it in the way her posture stiffened, in the pause before she looked up. Her eyes went to my hand, then back to the screen, as if she needed to confirm what she had seen. She didn't say anything. She didn't greet me the way she usually did. The day moved forward anyway. Meetings began. People talked. Decisions were made. No one commented on the ring. Or maybe they did, quietly, somewhere I couldn't hear. Emma worked efficiently, flawlessly even, but something in her had shut down. The warmth was gone. The attentiveness remained, but it was mechanical now, stripped of anything personal. I should have addressed it sooner. By late afternoon, I asked her if she had time to talk. My voice sounded calm, but inside I was bracing myself. She agreed without hesitation. We walked into the same conference room as the night before. The familiarity of it felt heavy. She sat down this time, her hands folded in her lap. I closed the door again, slower than before. I asked her if she was okay. She looked at me for a long moment, studying my face, my hands, the ring I had finally stopped hiding. Then she said, very clearly, without raising her voice, that of course she wasn't okay. She said I had given her hope, not with words, but with presence, with consistency, with the way I trusted her, relied on her, shared space with her every day. She said hope doesn't come from promises alone. Sometimes it grows from being chosen again and again in small ways. Then she said I put on a ring. There was no accusation in her tone, just exhaustion, like someone stating the final piece of a puzzle they never wanted to finish. I told her the truth, that I had gotten married recently, that it wasn't sudden, that it was something I had chosen carefully, deliberately, with someone I loved deeply. I said I hadn't told anyone at work because I believed my personal life didn't belong there. She asked if I understood how it looked from her side. I didn't answer right away. I knew any explanation would sound hollow now. She said she didn't blame my wife. She didn't even blame me for loving someone else. What hurt was being left in uncertainty long enough to build a future that was never real. She asked if I ever considered telling her earlier, if I ever thought honesty might be kinder than silence. I admitted that I hadn't, that I thought restraint was respect, that I thought I was protecting both of us. She nodded slowly and said that protection without information isn't protection at all. There was a long pause after that. She said she felt embarrassed, not because she had feelings, but because she had believed in something alone. She said walking into the office every day had become painful because every interaction now felt like a reminder of something she had imagined and lost at the same time. I apologized. Not formally, not professionally, personally. I told her I was sorry for the role I played in her pain, even if unintentionally. I said I never wanted to be the reason someone felt misled. She accepted the apology, but it didn't bring relief. She asked what would happen next. I told her I wanted to handle this with care, that her position, her dignity, her sense of safety at work mattered, that I would support whatever boundaries she needed. She said boundaries weren't enough anymore. When we left the room, something between us had permanently changed. There was no tension, no anger, no raised voices. Just distance. Clear, undeniable distance. The rest of the day passed slowly. Emma finished her tasks, sent her final emails, and left exactly on time. She didn't look back. That evening, I went home to my wife. We talked about our day. We cooked dinner. We shared a quiet normality that felt grounding and real. I loved her. I was certain of my choice. And yet, I carried the weight of knowing that someone else was hurting because I hadn't been clear soon enough. At work, the following days felt colder. Emma remained professional, but distant. The ease we once had was gone. Every interaction was brief, precise, necessary. I understood then that some lines, once crossed emotionally, cannot simply be redrawn. The ring on my hand was a symbol of commitment to one person, but it had also become a line that made everything else impossible. And for Emma, it marked the end of something that had never officially existed, but it felt real enough to break her heart. The change became official a week later. Emma asked for a private meeting. This time, it wasn't emotional. It wasn't hesitant. She came in prepared, calm, and composed in a way that made the decision feel final before she even spoke. She told me she was resigning. Not immediately, but soon. She had already spoken with HR. She framed it as a personal decision, a need for change, for distance. She said she didn't want this story to follow her through every hallway, every meeting, every morning she walked into the building. I asked if there was anything I could do to make her stay. She shook her head. Not angrily. Gently. She said staying would mean pretending nothing had happened. And she didn't want to live in a place where she had to shrink her feelings to remain professional. She said she needed a clean ending, not a compromise. I respected that. Her last weeks were quiet, efficient, exactly as she had always been. She documented processes, trained a replacement, closed every open thread. No one would have guessed what had happened between us. To everyone else, it looked like a routine transition. Between us, there was distance, but also clarity. On her final day, she stopped by my office once more. Not to talk about feelings. Not to reopen anything. Just to say goodbye. She thanked me for the opportunity. For trusting her. For the work we had done together. She said she didn't regret her time here, even if it ended painfully. I told her I hoped she would find what she was looking for. Somewhere else. With someone who could choose her fully, without hesitation or silence. She smiled at that. A small, honest smile. She said she was leaving the city. Not immediately, but soon. She wanted a place where no one knew her story, where she could start again without seeing reminders of what never became real. Then she left. There was no dramatic farewell. No last look back. Just a closed door and an empty desk the next morning. Life continued. I stayed. I remained at Microsoft, continued leading my team, continued building the life I had chosen. I went home every evening to my wife. We built routines, shared plans, talked about the future. My marriage was steady, intentional, real. I didn't question that choice. But I also didn't forget what happened. Emma became a lesson I carried quietly. Not about forbidden love or missed chances, but about responsibility. About how silence can shape expectations as powerfully as words. About how emotional clarity matters, even when no rules are broken. Sometimes, stories don't end with betrayal or dramatic decisions. Sometimes they end with two people walking in opposite directions, each doing what they need to survive. Emma didn't lose because she loved. I didn't win because I stayed. We both simply moved forward, carrying different truths from the same shared space. The love between us never became a relationship. It never started. And because of that, it ended without photos, without memories, without proof. Only with understanding. That was the ending. Clear. Quiet. Final.